Thanks very much for the nice intro, Ed. Yeah, so I run a little company called Liminal. We actually focus a lot on primarily transformation and change, and we try to bring a well-being and positive psychology lens to that. So yeah, Ed was sort of talking to me about, well, what would be a good thing to talk about in relation to some of the stuff that we've got coming up. And I just thought, well, actually, there's a few things that seem that are things that people find quite useful in terms of their work. So if you're working in change, hopefully I'll be able to share some good tips for you guys. But even if you're not directly officially working in a change role, what we're going to do is kind of look at my favorite change management model, which is the lean change model, look at why that's a good model, and then talk about it from a well-being perspective, which might sound a little bit of an odd thing, but that is exactly why I think it's worth talking about. I think well-being is it seems to be particularly of interest at the moment, and it's one of the things that we sort of do on a day-to-day basis anyway. And I'll explain a little bit more about why I think that's important as we go through. So yeah, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share a link in the chat, and if you can just click on that. We won't actually necessarily need it for a couple of minutes because I'll do an intro whilst that's all loading up for you. But if I send that out now, that should mean that you're all able to access it whilst that's getting going. So any issues with that link, do pop something in the chat, but hopefully that will take you through. You'll basically go to a mural sheet, which will kind of look a little bit weirdly laid out, but it'll make sense as we go. And you'll be entering as an anonymous user. It just means that you good point. I've sent that to thank you for Michelle for pointing that out. Let me send that to everyone rather than just Ed and Lisa. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that now. Great. So yeah, you'll be going in as an anonymous user, and that just means that everybody can get in nice and easily. So whilst you're doing that, I'll just give you a little bit of a background as to basically why I think that taking a well-being lens on transformation is really important. A number of years ago, I'd been working in change management probably for about 5 years or so at that point. This is just over 10, 12 years ago or so. And I was working on a huge rollout of a big trial of some healthcare technology. So this is rolling out technology to monitor people's health from their own homes. And one of the things that was really ironic about this was that whilst the program itself was all about supporting people's health and health outcomes, and trialing this new technology to do that, it was incredibly stressful for everybody involved from top down. So it actually had had a ministerial brief at the time. This was in the UK. So we had a very stressed minister. We had quite stressed governance folk in the middle. All of the people who were involved in the actual program, the number of times that people, my colleagues, were getting super stressed out. I pretty much saw every one of my colleagues in tears at one point. And even the clinicians that we were working with were finding it all quite full on. And I just thought, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't seem right. If we're going to be working in this space, then particularly now on this health program, but any time that we're rolling out transformation, there must be a better way to do this. I started sort of looking around, and that's essentially, forward wind a few years, that's essentially how I came across both positive psychology and lean change, actually around sort of similar sorts of times. And it's through lean change that I then developed an interest in an agile, and I've found that now what I do, and we're going to talk about lean change as a framework mostly today, but mostly what I do is I actually work with teams to implement change, but actually we use kind of agile as a mode of working, so that essentially we're looking at how do we become adaptive as an organization rather than simply putting in place a singular change. So it's about, you know, as you probably all will have experienced to some degree, that, you know, we're in this ever-changing world. I mean, it's so much of a cliche that you know, change is a constant, but that change has become, you know, really rapid. And I think that if you're working in ways that are in themselves adaptive, then you're setting yourselves up, you're building a muscle that enables you to continuously change and adapt. And you'll see hopefully how that works out through some of the things that we're going to go into today. The other side as well is that lean change, but more broadly, kind of the tools and the mindset that falls into that domain of agile, they're very well suited to supporting well-being, and that's for a range of reasons. So a number of so one way of looking at it is you look at the initial signatories on the Agile Manifesto. Quite a number of them actually have an interest in psychology that sort of included book chapters and written papers with a psychological sort of focus. And there are a range of elements that are built into certainly the manifesto, and then subsequently also are reflected very much in the ways of working that fall under that umbrella, that do support things that enable well-being. So things like collaboration in the way that improves our relationships at work, things like managing our attention in a better way, which is one of the things that can be very detrimental to our mental health, is when we're split across too many things. Things like actually being able to link through to the valuable outcomes that you're working on. So actually having that greater sense of meaning and purpose that to draw you in. All of these things are really critical for well-being. So as a background, that's why I think this stuff is important, and actually is all very much really linked together. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you will be able to